Today is August 25th, 2011. I'm Darren Robarts, and we're at the Warhawk Air Museum here in Napa, Idaho. I'll be interviewing George Rommel for our Veterans History Project in the partnership with the Library of Congress, and the cameraman operating that today is Al Pilch. Welcome, George.
Thank you. My name is George William Rommel, R-O-M-M-E-L, same as that famous Field Marshal. My address is 651 Sinex, S-I-N-E-X, Avenue, Pacific Grove, California, 93950. My birth date was December the 3rd, 1921. I was in the U.S. Army, in the Army Air Corps, and served my service record in the Air Corps is from June the 6th, 1942 to August 18th, 1945.
Well, again, sir, welcome so much for being here today and the privilege to be a part of this interview with you. Why don't you start where you grew up, where you were born, and just those early years of your life?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and typical brownstone house living, and we had the parlor floor. My father saw that I was having to play pretty much close to the sidewalk, and in the front there was no yard to play in, and so he was able to buy a house in Queens, Richmond Hill, Queens, where I lived until we moved to Illinois in 1940 after he had died in 1939. But I went through grade school and junior high school, which Mario Cuomo, former governor of New York State, also attended about 2 years after I had been there. And then Richmond Hill High School. The junior high school, well, anyway, we did 3 years work in 2 years, which was, you were invited to go to that school, you did not apply to go there. New York had some places like that. It had an art school, for instance, if you wanted to become a sculptor or an oil painter or something, or if you wanted automobiles, either to restore a body or to the body of a car in a wreck. Some people like to do that sort of thing. We had schools for that. We had a technical high school in Brooklyn for others who wanted to prepare for engineering later, you know, in university somewhere, and if not CCNY, City College of New York. So we had all kinds of wonderful educational opportunities in New York City. And of course we had Coney Island to play in and other places like that. So, but after my father died, we moved to Illinois, suburban Chicago, Elgin actually, where we resided for about 50 years through my mother's death and my brother's marriage and so on, but in my war service besides. So, and I worked my way. The reason we went to Illinois was the war was coming on, 39. It was about to start in a month or so after my father's death. And so my mother is a widow with 2 teenage boys and really no money. Mm. So she had several sisters, and one of them had a large Victorian house and extra rooms in that we could have, make an apartment in there. And so we went out there and lived, and mother went to work and so on. And I worked my way through college, a state college of Illinois. It's now Northern Illinois University with about 25,000 students, and even they give PhDs in some fields, as so many other schools are able to do too, after having grown up and having a sizable and qualified faculty to handle those the coursework. So that's where I went for my bachelor's. Then came the war, and I wasn't finished with the bachelor's when the war came on. When I joined June 6th of 42, I had to take my mother downtown Elgin to the center where they were enlisting, and because I wasn't 21, I had a sign. She had a sign for me, and it happened to be her birthday, the 12th. But I had been there the week before, and so that's why the June 6th, and started the paper's work then. So anyway, and from there, after the war, I went back to finish my bachelor's degree there, and they had a special scholarship for me. I was graduating with honors, and if I wanted to go on for a master's degree at the University of Illinois, I said, no, I have the GI Bill, and I'd like you to give that opportunity. And I named the young man. He was a physics major. He was from a farm. He had no money. And I said, he's the one who should go to the University of Illinois and get that further work in physics or whatever he wants. And so that went over very well. And I went then to the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago. I had finished pre-med as well as a major in English and minors in chemistry and zoology and German. So I went to Northwestern. No, I went first to the University of Illinois College of Medicine for the first 2 years, and it was very enjoyable work. But what I wanted to go into there would be psychiatry, and it was a really coming area. Was quite in a fog, in the sense that they had 2, if not 3 systems of nomenclature. The way you describe a name and describe an illness, a disease even, an illness is psychiatric, varies from, and you'd have to use this system or that system or that system and try to straighten it out. And I thought, if you really want to spend your life working among 3 systems of nomenclature, and they can't even decide what things are, then what kind of work are you going to be doing? It's sort of working in the dark. And I'd be as much in the dark as maybe the patient. There was that, and then came out that it was the profession with the highest incidence of suicides. I thought, yes, you're too close to the to existence, really, in psychiatry, and to life itself. And so you can go off the deep end. I know one who was, became a psychiatrist. He was the head of our medical class, and outstanding brilliance and so on. He went off into drugs with these hippies that came along, and was caught with all that, and wild parties. And he was an outstanding psychiatrist in upper Gold Coast area of Chicago, and was dismissed from the whole practice of medicine. Wow. So, and I don't know whether he had to go to jail, but he lost his money, he lost everything. So, and there was his wife. So anyway, that's what the penalties can be. And there were some other limitations to wanting to go into psychiatrist. So I gave that up, and I decided not to go further in the last 2 years, which would be the clinical years, you might say, in the practice of medicine, in order to go to Northwestern. And I took back to the arts, and I took my master's and PhD in English literature there. In between, I might say, after I had left the University of Illinois College of Medicine, I conducted some tours for a while of the West, and that were fascinating. They were Pullman tours, 2 weeks or 3 weeks long, and then I went to, I got another tour conducting job, which took me to Europe every summer, all through the 50s, late 40s, well, really from 53 to 60, And I'd been there, though, in Europe, 48, 49, on my own, studying at the University of Paris, La Sorbonne, S-O-R-B-O-N-N-E, which is like the liberal arts area of the University of Paris. And then I went to, as I say, Northwestern for my master's and PhD. And the first job I had was down at Eastern Illinois University. Well, there was briefly a term at Beloit College, which is just north of Rockford, Illinois. And that's about 70, 80 miles northwest of Chicago, and about equal distance up to Madison, the capital of Wisconsin, and in there lies Beloit. So a very fine school. They regarded themselves as the Yale of the Middle West. They had a fine faculty and a wonderful library given by Andrew Carnegie. And we always call him Carnegie in New York, like Carnegie Hall. And but his proper name was Carnegie. And one had to learn to say that then, especially in other areas where they had, as I say, a marvelous holdings of books there. So they had a fine library in that little fine arts college, Beloit College. So then, as I say, Eastern Illinois University, a state university, and I had about 28 years there of active duty, as it were, and met some wonderful people, former students of mine who have been lifelong friends. And I'm visiting two of them here.
Sir, I'm going to stop you just for a second, and I appreciate where you're at right now. And I think we're somewhere in the 50s right now, as far as your chronology.
Yes.
Okay. Let's back up just a little bit, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
If that's okay, and then we'll reboot and go forward
Whatever.
From there. But I wanted to sort of.
I skipped the war, I realize.
and we'll go back to that too. But I wanted to sort of ask you some questions about the 30s and the Depression time, and how growing up in Brooklyn, kind of a different area than the Midwest, obviously in the West Coast, and it was an interesting time in our history during that time. And so maybe just talk a little bit about the Depression time and growing up in Brooklyn, being probably a Brooklyn Dodger fan, I'm assuming. Everybody had to.
But I was also a New York Yankee.
Oh, really? Living in Brooklyn? Wow. So maybe talk about that a little bit. That was a great rivalry back then.
We had moved to Queens. I said Richmond Hill, Queens. Okay. We lived only about 2 years in Brooklyn. Okay. My father bought the house so I would have a nice backyard to play in and not be out in the streets. So, and it was, that worked out very well. The Depression hit us very hard. My father was a specialist. He was from Switzerland and knew everything about watches and jewelry, but particularly watches. And he made the special watches for Cartier at 5th Avenue, 52nd Street, if you know that place. And so he handled all their very special work for years, and came the Depression, and who wanted a luxury watch? So there went the income. So we had savings, but that, you know, you have to keep stretching that. That was very hard. So I got some jobs, you know, working my way, you might say, through high school. I had a newspaper job, 3 routes rather, and deliver papers. In the winter, snow and ice. In this summer, well over 100 degrees in the heat and high humidity that we have in New York City. And also, the only place to go swimming would be either like Coney Island, which was a little hard to take because a lot of newspapers and maybe even glass in the sand, things weren't picked up that much during the Depression, simply because the city couldn't afford to do all that work. And it was a time when we had Mayor LaGuardia as the mayor, who was very much well favored, very much liked, and he even humbled himself enough to go to the Barnum and Bailey Circus, when it would make a parade route around, or once around the ring, with all their actors and animals, you might say, in tow. And he was behind the horses. And the horses would have droppings, and along comes the mayor, and we're all feeling very sorry for him. But that was the kind of man he was. He didn't mind it. And he would read comics to the children on Sunday mornings from the newspapers. So yeah, he was a really down-to-earth and home-like man. So we're quite happy with that. And to have that kind of feeling, and it was all over the city that way, about such a large area is rare, very rare. No other mayor had that kind of contact. And when he said something about cleanliness in the restaurants, because we had Typhoid Mary, and we had cases of, I lost some neighbors through that. A neighbor got it from eating in some restaurant where Typhoid Mary had been, and went to the hospital right away, and 3 days later she died. But in that day and two in between, her daughter visited her, and she came down with it too and died. So the poor husband was left alone in a few days' time. So there were things like that that hit our neighborhood hard. A boy, 12 years old, died of some mysterious illness. In Switzerland, the air was pure. Growing up there, your life was quite secure from impurities. He comes to America, and he had a cold like anyone else, you might say, and that was really an attack of lung cancer. And every one of us usually has somewhere in our lungs a little spot where it's been grown over there by tissue and all, but that spot way inside has the center of active tubercular germs. And this is within all of us. That gives us our inoculation against TB. It's not really known, but he never had that. So when he came down with it, it got hold of him, and he was gone before, in the final stages, before any help could reach him, and medications of that time. So that's why we lost him and had to move. So we always had enough to eat. We had enough for clothing, but nothing. We all were very modest in any demands of money, because there wasn't anything extra, really. If you saved a ginger bottle or a seltzer bottle, quart bottle, and brought that back to a dealer, a delicatessen or whatever, a bar, you'd get a nickel. Now you go around neighborhoods and look for some of those bottles, and you've got 2 bottles, 10 cents, enough to go to the movies Saturday. That's the kind of thing we had to do.
We'll talk about, were you a baseball fan? The whole Dodger and Yankee rivalry back in the 20s and 30s was huge.
I couldn't afford to go to the games, no. And they were way uptown in the Bronx, you know, in New York, and that's a long way from where we were in Queens. So it would involve a couple of different trains, elevated subways, and then sitting out there in the bleachers in the sun. You can't do that. So it was over the radio. That's where we learned, or followed it mostly. So, and a lot of the women, instead of listening to soap operas, they watched, rather not watch, that's TV term, listen to baseball games, and it was usually the New York Yanks or the Bums, the Dodgers. Yeah, Brooklyn Bums.
Well, you were about 20 years old when Pearl Harbor happened. Do you remember that day and hearing the news? And
Oh, yes,
what was
yes.
your reaction to that as a young
worked
man?
my way through college, and I had a job in a theater, local theater, and there'd be a rush for seats at 1 o'clock or so, and I was taking tickets, and suddenly someone said, the war has just begun. And so we had to make that announcement in the theater, and most of them stayed because it had begun. Okay, now watch the film. It paid, they want to see it. And so it was the same situation in I remember the Loews Valencia Theater in Queens, in New York, where when Will Rogers died. He was killed in a crash up in Alaska at Barrow, B-A-R-R-O-W, and there's a Point Barrow nearby. He and Wiley Post, was it, or Wiley, something like that. That was a shocking thing. Well.
Well, take us to the place where it's now 1941 going to 1942.
Oh, okay.
You enlisted in 42, June 42.
Yes, and with that, and then that was when that was Pearl Harbor. That's right. We already were very much aware of going on the war because of what was happening to the Jews in Germany and Austria, which had fused into one nation in an Anschluss, and we in the Middle West were a bit isolated. We were torn between the East and the Western points of view, and the West wanted nothing to do with World War II over in Europe, and then came the attack on Pearl Harbor. Well, they couldn't wait to get into the service in the West right away, and the East, we were thinking of Europe more than the Pacific, but we knew we were between two powerful enemies, ready to, like tweezers, picking us up, and we squeezed. So we had to move on. We had to go. So it wasn't a question of whether we would be going, it would be when, or in what form, or what service. And so we looked into these various programs that were offered, and I chose the U.S. Army Air Corps. And others, friends of mine, you went into a different program which could put them into the Air Corps, but they would be in service supplies or something like that, or they would be put into the regular Army itself, and that'd be carrying 50-pound bags uphill, that kind of thing. And the infantry, and my neighborhood buddy, that's in the war, and there are things that happen. You have bad maintenance because some of those mechanics, the men, and they were in the service, they were not civilians, and they were like permanent personnel at a base, and they were allowed to get away with things. And so you would have poor maintenance. And Walter wrote me from India that they were now in B-26s, and he wrote about the poor maintenance of these planes going down left and right. And he was worried, and that was the last letter I had from him. He went down over the jungles in northern Burma, and on fire at that. Unbelievable.
And who was this gentleman? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
Who was this gentleman?
Walter was a neighbor boy, and his mother taught Latin, and she was a full-blooded Indian, had been, the grandmother was also a full-blooded Cherokee, but Walter was half, but he was more Irish than he was Indian, American Indian. But it was a great guy to be with. We went everywhere in New York City. He knew museums I didn't know, and particularly what exhibits in them. And you wouldn't know what to talk with him about. He just was interested in all kinds of things, and made observations, and a wonderful wit and sense of humor. So we had a good time, and just kids stuff, you know. I remember when I was 11, he was 12, and he made me a belt with Indian symbols on there all across, and wove that thing with the beads, the kits you'd get, you know, childhood. And he said, you can put it on a belt. I said, well, Walter, look at it, I'm not that big. I can't wear it. He said, you'll be able to wear it someday. I never did.
Did you enter the service together?
No, he went into this other branch, that mixture thing of the Army, U.S. Army, and didn't specify the Air Corps. They put him into the Air Corps, and he was, well, he operated one of the guns is what it was, and but that was only one of the jobs. He did odd jobs in that part of the Air Corps, which was in India, in Upper Assam, ASSAM, and which is straight north of Burma. So, but the whole, the family, the father had cancer. He was a broker in downtown Wall Street, and there was a brother who was born quite defective, but they took care of him until he died. But the mother was left in a couple of years with no children and no husband. So it was very sad. And she wrote me once more. We wrote for a while, then I never heard from her again. And she ran the, what do they call that, service,
USO?
no, no, the draft.
Oh.
She ran the draft board.
Okay.
In that center of that part of Long Island. So, as I say, she had taught Latin. She was well educated and did a fine job of that, I'm sure. So there was that.
We'll talk a little bit about, you went into the service June 6th of 42. Where you enlisted?
Actually, we didn't have to go in. This was the part of joining up. The idea was to let us finish college if they could hold off from needing our services. And but all of a sudden came March 28th, 1943. Whoosh! All in 3 days' time, we were en route. And so first we went down to Keesler Field, which is Biloxi, Biloxi, in southern Mississippi, on the Gulf. And one thing you learn about travel in the Army, if it's a Pullman, you get the upper berth if you want to sleep alone. If you take a lower berth and refuse to get into an upper, they're going to sleep next to somebody. They put two in the lower, always. But it enlisted me, you know. But I went for an upper and put my bag up there, and that was that. 5 days en route to, oh no, 2 days down there. But then from there we went to Penn State College to refresh our make sure that we understood and could work mathematics through trigonometry and the theory of flight, theory of all kinds of things. And we had regular Penn State College professors who taught us. So it meant a review of algebra, geometry, as well as trig, and physics. Oh yes, physics, the whole year of college. And I'd finished those things, so I was able to tutor here and there, help some of the guys, who are having trouble, give them other ways of looking at it. And then from there, we went to classification, Nashville, Tennessee. It is July of 1943. Hot, humid. I grew up in New York. I knew what Chicago and that area suburbs were in Illinois. And here in Nashville, it was to die. I had never been in such heat. And so I found myself put down on the board, my name would appear, to report for KP duty. Well, now, you know what garbage cans are? Most people haven't seen ash cans. Well, they were used for garbage. They were used even for cutting the vegetables and letting them soak in there first. They had to be cleaned, those things, one after another. And that takes a lot of time. And you're there all day, and you have no time off. So I had a long, hot day one time, from morning to night, and 2 days later, my name was back on there. I went to the board, and I simply erased it. I put my line through it. And no one knew that. No one saw me do that. But I had it. I didn't want any more of that stuff. So my name appeared 2 days later. But by that time, I had my orders to go to California. I had passed the test for bombardier, preferably, and then with training in navigation besides. So I didn't have to report. I could simply show them my papers, and they took me off the list. Took care of that. And 5 days out to 6 days, the 6th day we got to California, Santa Ana Army Air Base. When we got our checks once a month, we were now cadets, so we got $75. As GIs back at Keesler Field, we were $50 a month. So 75. And they had a list of fellows there sitting there. You get your check here in cash, $75. This one wants a contribution to the Red Cross. I said no, out loud, very loud, because to me it was a racket. There was my name was not written down. All he was doing is piling cash there. And who he was, no name. I said, no. What? I said, no. Went on the next. He wanted $3 for the grass fund. My government asking me $3, a contribution for grass in California? I said, no. And it encouraged some others. And gradually, that brought the attention of some officers, some outside, or it got outside, and those guys were court-martialed. And we got a check. All of us who had gone through Santa Ana Army Air Base and had that sort of thing invoked upon us, we got a check from the government for, I don't know, $30, $40, $50, something like that, to indemnify our losses. So that was nice.
So when you were in California at Santa Ana Air Base there,
Is this where you?
We went to school there. Really, this is primary, you might say, and we were learning about the Air Corps, and it's not Air Force. We learned about the Air Corps. It was never the Army Air Force or the Air Force until 1947. But don't confuse that with that we also had air forces abroad. When we went to Italy, we were in the 15th Air Force, and the 5th was somewhere else, the 6th was somewhere else. We all know that in England, the 8th Air Force. So that is separate, that's war categorization, you might say. But that was not the whole. It was always the Air Corps during the war.
Now, were you an officer when you went into the Air Corps?
Oh, yes, yes.
You were an officer, okay.
Well, now let me point out that after primary there, we went to Kingman, Arizona, and for gunnery, and that included air-to-air gunnery. Two nice things happened. One was that on my birthday, I turned 22 in 43, December 3rd, and we were in a B-17. We had practicing air-to-air gunnery, and we had done our work for the time allotted, and the pilot came on the intercom and said, "How would you fellas like a ride through the Grand Canyon? We have enough time. We've done our work. We have enough time for that." So he starts at the west end, okay, and comes down into the not level, down in under. You look up the level and higher and higher. He knows where he's going. He took us through the whole, from west to east, along the Colorado of the Grand Canyon.
In a B-17.
Yeah. And I was curled up in the nose, and I got on the intercom and I said, "Captain, this is the finest present that the Air Corps could possibly give me."
Wow.
And the other nice thing that happened came Thanksgiving. And a buddy of mine there, we were not alone. Almost all of us could not eat the food. It was so poor. We could eat breakfast there, but we went to the PX for a hamburger or a cheeseburger or even a double and a malted milkshake. That was our lunch and that was our dinner. But it came Thanksgiving. It was getting rather stinky, you know, because we weren't eating the other food. No, we refused to go. So we paid out of our pockets for this other. And they promised they would have both turkey and steak, T-bone steaks. And we were welcome to have either or both. We had plenty and so on. I said, "Dalt," to my friend, "the way it will work is the first guys who go through can have both if they want. But it'll never happen after that. They'll run out of the steaks." And that's exactly what happened. We were among the first. We had some of both. We're very happy. That was well done. And the food was good that meal. But it caused quite a howl because the rest of them were lying. They couldn't get it. That's when the second time the government sent me a check of something like whatever the allowance was for food rationing. We got that for our whole stay in Kingman.
Wow.
Then from there we went to our respective duties, either to navigation school or to and a base for that, and to bombardier training. Now, I went to Deming, New Mexico, and it's not far from Las Cruces, which is a kind of a colonial town in a way, and that's just north of El Paso and Juarez on the other side. We had a young fellow, of course we were all young at that time, who was married and they had a baby daughter, Roberto Samaniego. He a wonderful, jovial attitude and everything. And he was allowed to live in their home, the family. His father was the consul from Mexico to El Paso. So he was allowed to drive back and forth every day, about 80 miles each way, because his pregnant wife and this kind of thing, and they had the baby. So, at any rate, he told me where to eat in Juarez, Ciudad Juarez, and how to order, what to order in this way of a steak, because I did not want wrapped in pork, bacon, you know, which was kind of tradition in the Middle West or earlier part of the eastern part of the Far West. So things like that. So we enjoyed our stay there in Deming, New Mexico. I gave the museum there later after the war. I went back and visited, gave them my A2 jacket. I showed you an A2 over here, and showed them that. I brought mine for they had a kind of a uniformed group of people in a home, and as if going out or about to go out. So for that jacket, that was necessary.
For informational sake, talk about the A2 jacket and the kind of jacket it was and what it was used for.
Oh, well, originally it was used in summer flying, particularly in open cockpit planes. The Air Corps had some of them, but they didn't use them during the war. But I mean, the training, some of the older people had been in them, and they had those jackets back then. They were made of lamb skin, and not goat skin, and not lamb skin is more expensive and hard to get. But it wears beautifully, and it's got a nice light weight to it, and it's very flexible all over. So, and then we would have a patch sewn on with our names, like in this case, Lieutenant George W. Rommel. It was on there, and then our Air Corps emblem above that. No, wings. My wings would go there. Yeah, and my bombardier wings, and on the arm we had the patch. So, and there was no fur on the collar, no, and the sleeves were leather down to the cuffs, which were knitted wool, knitted cotton or wool, whichever, and it was lined with simple cotton, nothing fancy, useful. And these we all liked very much. Some fellows later, for each mission, they had a way of putting on a bomb, which would indicate, and they would wear a bomb armor. I didn't bother with that stuff. Most of us really didn't. So that was one part of the outfit. Another part of the outfit, when you get on board, when you're going to fly a mission, you've got not only your own clothes, and you have your no-low shoes, the GI issue, which was over the ankle, high shoes, we used to call them. And we had a type which the leather turned outside, the rough on the outside, smooth on the inside. It was easier on the feet for long periods. And you put that into, well, you put your pants on first with the braces, and they were lined. They were wool. Excuse me. They were sheep lined. The whole outfit, the jacket, and the boots, all sheep lined, leather and brown on the outside, thick. You put that on first. Then put your boots on over that, and then put on your flight jacket and your flight helmet. But if you're going high altitude, and for us that we could maybe go to 30,000. We never went above 28.5 because they were not pressurized, and when you are flying at high altitude, your body starts to distend, and it cannot be helped because there's no pressure holding everything back in place. So you have this ballooning, and you have to have clothes that permit that, yet that's large enough to permit that. So, one time, I was putting on my boots, and I was sitting on, the plane was on a hard stand, and we used sections of metal with holes in them, and clasps at the end. You could put one against another and make a landing base or something we call a parking space. We had a different name for it, but anyway. And we could turn the plane on that, and it wouldn't go through the mud. So I'm just sitting on that, getting on my boots, and I felt the earth jolt. I thought, oh, something. It was as though, the shake was so good, forceful, and it was not an earthquake. It was those. I don't know how to express it, but it was very hard to knock. And I thought, something has happened somewhere, and it'll come in a few seconds, because the sound comes first, and that sound follows upon the jolt, and in an explosion, the earth will transfer the jolt faster than you'll hear it. And came the sound. It was as though a two-car garage had just exploded just feet away, that kind of thing. A B-24 with two fellows in the co-pilot and the bombardier, whom I had met the day before in Bari, Bari, Italy. Bari is due east from Naples. There's Naples here, and Bari is the circle over there, B-A-R-I. And we were in the Apennine Mountains right in between. Anyway, those fellas were about 30 miles away and had gotten in their plane, same gear as I did and all, and they, bombs were okay and all. Took off to form the mission that I'd be on, joining them shortly. And they were had gained altitude, a couple of thousand feet, or even 5, if that. When the wing of a B-24 has one wing, and in the center where the body is, it's a little higher than the wing, and there are flaps up in there above the wing in that upper part of the body, because there is a life raft in each, and they open up, and when you press a button for them to do so, and out they come, inflating as they do. That's what lets them to escape from their hatches there, and you've got your life raft, and you're standing probably on the wing of the plane, hoping it'll hold a little longer before you get into the life raft. But here they are, a few thousand feet above. And those life rafts each hit the ailerons, the twin tails back there, and hit that in such a way, in such a force, it dumped the plane down.
Wow.
So, and I had taken a picture of those fellas, of each of them, and I said I'd send them, so I had the address and their names and all, to their base, and I sent a letter of sympathy with the family of each. I never heard. I don't know if they ever sent them or not. And that brings another little story. After a mission, we would come back to our little, what if you had a tent, or we built a little house. I learned Italian in order to deal with the men who had the 2-foot block or wood or whatever. And so we had a little 2-bedroom house, upper and lower bunks in each, a very simple place in the living room. And hot and cold water, hot cold, from the fireplace or from the stove, we made hot water in the kettle, put that into this corner sink, and we had water from a 55-gallon oil drum outside for cold water. So that much was allowed, but no toilet facilities. You had to go to a central place where everything was neat and clean. So anyway, you would find in your accommodation 2 sacks, maybe 3 sacks of mail, and you had to censor. You had to read every line, and these lovely, whether it was to a girlfriend, a wife, a mother, whatever, but they could not reveal where they were or anything that in some way would identify them with a location if they got into the wrong hands. So we had to read that. And one time I had a letter to a certain lady, and on the inside was a letter to her, so it was thought. But evidently, this Miss So-and-so, and he's writing Dear Mother, or something like that. And no, it was this. No, a big part. This was with a lady's first name here, and inside the letter had a different lady's name. So one was to a sweetheart, and one was to a wife or someone close. Over here, another one, and he got mixed up. So I held that letter aside, an envelope, and sure enough, as we went through, I said, keep your eyes open. We might find another with a mix-up of first names of women between the envelope and the letter. Found that. I switched them. I thought, you know, the women have enough problem. This can all be straightened out after the war, but, you know, let peace reign. That's the only time I did anything like that. But I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
It was a decent thing to do, it seemed to me, and I don't regret it. But other than that, why, everything went, whatever you had in there, that went, provided it met the censorship regulations. Something else you wanted to ask?
Well, just at the end of the war, were you, when victory in Europe came, were you still in Europe at that time?
Yes, we had VE Day right there. I'd been in Rome for 7 days and back about 5 days, enough to fly one more mission up to Linz, L-I-N-Z, Austria, and bomb there. And we were getting near there, and we were ordered back because the closure of Patton and his troops and all that, and the Russians from the east, they were putting an end to the war. So we got credit for it, but we didn't actually do any bombing that day. That was the last mission we flew.
Or on B-24s, or were we at B-7?
B-24s, and no other plane. Yeah.
What bombardier group were you in? What bombardier group were you in?
Oh, the 460th, 460, okay. 460th Bomb Group. Yeah.
And was stationed in Italy for the most part during that whole time of the war, was it?
All the time we were there.
Right.
At one mission, I went up to the plane, and the pilot and co-pilot were in there, and they had the windows open. I said, you know, you two, and I know you're 20. I don't know how old you are. He was 19, the co-pilot. I said, here I am, getting on a plane and flying. I could be flying with you. And I said, you're not old enough to operate, even get a license to operate a car in New York City. Even to learn, you have to be 21.
So how many missions did you actually?
50.
50?
I finished my whole 50.
50 missions.
Yeah. Some of you got double credit for the very long distance ones. And later they changed the system so that 26 sorties. A sortie is you go out and return, whether you do any bombing or not. But they still had mission count, as I say, beyond a certain area line. It was all double, because there was one time we were. Sometimes an engine would freeze up, and we had gone up the Brex or Blackhammer. We had oil weak, and so-called, because every day we had to go way up to the end of our ability to fly and return in the same day. We couldn't get any gas anywhere else, so had to have enough. And they were in the Sudetenland, that part of Czechoslovakia that was separated by Hitler, you remember, and and these were oil wells, and particularly refineries there, and they were major areas for the Germans, for the Nazis, to be able to sustain equip their tanks and everything, even to run cities. So without that oil, they had to go by truck in between cities and get off there and take a streetcar and fill the streetcar with goods in order to help feed the populace.
Wow.
So we were returning from there, and we had lost one engine outboard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2 the body, and 3, 4, as I looked from the tail forward. And one was gone, and then 4 went, and 3 was a little weak, maybe more anyway, but that held all the electrical equipment. So we were, in a bad way. I had coordinates for secret landing fields, 2 different places behind the Russian lines, and we could go to either one of them and land, but we would not be able to come back out. We'd have to go out through Russia in some way, and then they would get us out through an exchange of some sort. But we would not be arrested or anything. It's just that they wanted to keep everybody on that side and not be damaged, injured, let's say, by moving back into the west. So I had that, and I had a secret landing field in Yugoslavia on an island, little island just off the coast of, not far from Dubrovnik, and the island of Vis, V-I-S. And that one there, we could land, but we could never take off. The landing strip was about, the strip for the airplane would be about 650 feet long. And would be hard to land, but he figured he could get the plane in safely on that. But we knew we could not take off. So we would have to come out by some Italian fishing ship or Yugoslav ship, which would, fishing ship at night, take us across the Adriatic to Italy. That'd be another escape route. And so, what to do? Because it was getting dangerous. We had already come down from over the Alps, and we were under 10,000 feet. And we had thrown out all our oxygen, anything, armament, nothing that was movable, that was all thrown out to keep weight down and keep us aloft. And so I took a vote, and I went to the tail gunner. I didn't go over the intercom. I said, I'm going to take a vote of everyone here. Everyone's going to have to speak and tell me, by the way, the bombardier is in charge of the plane on a mission. Okay? So therefore, when I say everyone's going to have to respond. I start with the tail gunner. I gave him the 4 choices: either the secret landing fields, or in the behind Russian area, or the island of Vis, or attempt to fly across the Adriatic and land it at our base at home, fly home. So I said, which of the four do you want? You speak first. And he did. I said, another one, ball gunner, the waist gunners, the nose gunner, and Sperry upper gyro, upper gyro type. I'm speaking too fast. The turret, it was known as Sperry upper gyro, and that's for the flight engineer to operate the gun there and hit anybody coming, attacking us from above. And so they all gave their voices, and then I went to the co-pilot and last the pilot, and each one said home. So and we did make it at 10 o'clock, the last plane in, and were they happy to see us go in.
And it was rare to get to 50 missions. Was it? I mean, it was very, very rare.
Well, we flew mostly long distance. See, out of England, you flew shorter distances, and you could rack up your numbers of missions sooner. But we had to fly long distances.
One plane? All 50 missions?
Oh no, not the same plane.
Okay.
We had models D through J, and the J was the last model of the B-24. We had a couple of them. They were neat. Okay. We liked them a little better. But what did I fly home in? Across the Atlantic? Across the Mediterranean, North Africa, from Marrakesh over to Dakar, French West Senegal there. Dakar is on the bulge of Africa, and then we fly across the South Atlantic to Natal, Brazil, on the bulge of Brazil, of South America, and then up north to Trinidad, British Guiana, Jonestown, remember? Well, the airport is nearby there, and we were there for a night, and then finally over to Borinquen Field in northwest corner of Puerto Rico, and from Borinquen, it's 1,000 miles to Miami, and we simply turned on Miami and went up to Savannah, Georgia, and then transferred to the DC-3 to Charleston, South Carolina, where we boarded trains. You think they had Pullmans for us? They did not. They had day coaches. Remember what a day coach was? With a seat that could be pushed forward and backward in order to face forward or ride backwards, whichever you wanted. And they put us in there and gave us 2 seats for every 2 so that we could put our legs up. Well, we thought. Then they brought in more fellas. So we had 2 on every seat. Wow. So we put them facing each other so we could put our feet up in between the guys, and they did with their feet on it. That's the only way we could get our legs from being dangling all that time. No air conditioning and no food, no diet. We had to eat whatever we could get in little stops here and there. 3 days in that train. So welcome home.
Sir, we'll only have about 3 more minutes. I just want to ask you one question, maybe just as a way of follow-up. What is maybe a message that you could, many people will probably see this down the road someday, hopefully, even to your children or grandkids, great-grandkids. What's maybe one message that you would communicate to us all in just your years of experience here in America and what you've gone through?
Well, it's a time that's unique, and you are in it not because you really want to be there, want to bomb or kill or things like that, but that it means the survival of your country and survival of your families and everything you hold dear. It's something that no one else can help to undertake except those who are fit to be able to physically, mentally, to be able to carry out the tasks. As a result, there are memories, And I remember in 2 occasions I said to myself, I'll never forget this in my life. I can't possibly. It was so awful. I have no memory of it. That happens to us. And we let it go in time, and those awful things are gone. You remember things that turned out well better, if only for you, because your neck is on the line all the way along. You know, when you're on a target going over the bomb, between the initial point of the bomb run to the target, it's not very long, it's only a few minutes. But those few minutes, that's where all the guns, 400 and 500, 600 almost guns are at you. And you don't know from second to second whether you'll draw another breath. You can be right on you and blow you up. It happened to my 2 roommates. We had 3 in a room in Bombardier School, and they died fairly early. So I said to myself, 3, death comes in 3s, supposedly the old saying. Well, I got by. So you never know, and those who did sacrifice their lives are treasures. They are real treasures in our history and in our personal lives. And you don't forget them. They're still alive.
Well, sir, we want to thank you so much for your service and obviously an amazing time in our history here in America. But thank you, sir, for being with us today. And,
You're most welcome.